So you know that saying that you never really know what you have until it's gone, that we're too much in a rush to the new shiny thing and abandon the old thing before realizing how special and unique and how much joy it gave us. I feel like that we passed that nexus with so many things, with film photography, with music, with books. In the rush to digitize and to stream and to subscribe to everything, there's a lot that's actually been lost. And I feel like bikes and mechanical bike components are at that point as well. I quipped in a previous video that we are, living in the age of peak mechanical. If you're a fan of mechanical bike parts, this is probably about as good as it's going to get. That's going to be what we're talking about today as we assemble this bike from a brand called Sombra Cycles. They're based in Spain. The frames are hand built in Madrid by our friend Pablo, and I'm really excited to check this out and see what a made in Spain bike is like. Let's get unwrapping and start yapping. I picked this bike up today with the Omnium, which is always a treat because it's not very far, but it freaks people out when they see a cargo bike carrying another bike in the front. Definitely a bit of a rare sight here in Girona. All right, this bike is very securely wrapped. It's got some of the stuff off, and we can see what the frame color is. All right, it's this nice bluish color. Got some GRX cranks here. GRX 810 rear derailleur, one of my favorites of all time. And this is kind of interesting. So the cassette here is an 11 to 40. This Sombra Cycles sell their bikes either as frame sets or as completes. They asked me what drivetrain I'd like to try that with, and of course, I went with the JRX 2x. And it's cool to see that they spec'd it out with a nice big cassette there. Get more of this packaging stuff out of the way. So like a lot of you, I have varied interests and into photography, obviously, and filming. I was a photographer before, and when I was working full time as a photographer, it was this weird transition time between film and digital. I still remember shooting my last two jobs for the local paper with film before I finally invested kind of begrudgingly into a digital camera. But I remember the hype back then. Everyone was so quick to jump into digital, and people just kind of completely abandon all the film stuff. I actually bought up a bunch of old darkroom equipment at that time because I was still super into film. A film drying cabinet, huge and larger, a fancy Kersage darkroom timer, you name it. I was able to get it on fire sale because people were leaving it. Fast forward today, film photography is picking up steam, but there's not as much resources being put to it. So film stocks are very hard to find. They're expensive. They're expensive to buy. They're expensive to develop, and a lot of the old tooling for cameras and repair parts has disappeared. They've or no lo- has just disappeared. Camera repair is disappearing. So if you wanted to get into that analog film experience today, it'd be pretty expensive. Seeing all that today and looking back, I didn't realize I was living through kind of peak film photography. The film cameras weren't going to get any better. That availability of film stocks wasn't going to get any better than back then. In fact, things would get worse and much more expensive. Take off a little bit more of this, and I honestly believe we're at that point with bicycles. Bicycles like the film camera were a very mature technology, and there was only so much more you could actually do to make massive improvements. So it makes sense for the big component manufacturers to get into electronic shifting. That just seems like the next logical step. But for me, I don't want to make the same mistake I made back then with film, where I didn't appreciate that we were living in peak analog photography. So I just wanted to take this moment and appreciate peak mechanical bike parts. It's really interesting when you think of it in those terms. So to be clear, in this video, I'm not going to be ranking against electronic shifting and AI shifting. All that stuff is probably a done deal. It's a iceberg that we're all flowing towards. Knowing that, I think it is an interesting exercise to just stop and appreciate the amazing gear range that we have now. Mostly does take some hacking, that we're probably at the apotheosis of what SRAM and Shimano are gonna do, or are willing to do, or are willing to invest in terms of mechanical shifting. And I know some of you are gonna posit the idea that this is where the kind of third party Chinese manufacturers, Chinese factories can step in. Brands like S-Ride, Microshift, Sensa, LT Wu. I actually think that's not true. What we've seen is that those companies did step up with some counter mechanical offerings. So you could get 105 equivalents, so you could get 10 speed, 11 speed. But I think that was just to get their foot in the door so that they could compete with SRAM and Shimano in electronic shifting. I think that's their end goal. At least that's what it seems like to me, that they don't want to confine themselves to just like old stuff, that they want to flex their engineering and manufacturing muscles to really compete head on. It's kind of like in the camera space where Sigma was once viewed as a, kind of third-party lens, not as good as like native Canon or Nikon glass. But recently they've stepped it up. They want to be just as good as the first parties. And I think that's what we're going to be seeing with the lesser known Chinese manufacturers. All that to say that I think there's a lot of false hope in thinking that they're going to keep the mechanical torch alive. That likely, if they can, they know where the money is, they're going to do electronic shifting as well. Of course, I could be wrong. This is just, one person on the internet talking about things. All right, I'm going to focus for a second so I can get the fork in. The fork is carbon. So far I'm digging the build kit. I've got a silver zip seat post, a silver zip stem here, because as we know, the silver components are the best components. Okay, just kind of rough this in just so stalks kind of fall through. One interesting thing about this fork is that it's got adjustable fork rake. That tech has been around for a while, but I've actually never had a chance to play with it. So that's one of the things I'm excited about this bike, is to see, to what degree changing, the fork rake does affect the steering and the handling. This is a bike that really warms the cockles of my heart. Uh, 2x. It's made with some Reynolds 725. It's got eyelets for rack and fender in the rear. So again, very utilitarian. One of the big changes they did with this frame from the previous version of the Grus is they shortened the chainstay to about 430. So it's a nice all-rounder geometry. What do you got here? You've got some DT Swiss 1850 splines, and the tires are by Pirelli. These are the Cinturato. I've heard good things about these tires, haven't tried them myself. And the tire size is 700 by 50. What we've got on the stand here, I'm going to put the calipers on and see how it actually measures. So interesting. True width is actually closer to 45.5. Stated width is 700 by 50. So I was gonna say they look wide, but they didn't look like a true 50 to me. So what are the other implications if it's true that we are in peak mechanical? I mean, I feel like, I feel like companies have only so many resources. If they're going to divide their time in developing more electronic shifting, which is more likely the case, or more mechanical, which is probably less likely, they're going to bias one over the other. So I suspect that in terms of mechanical stuff, we're going to see a slowdown, uh, maybe even a discontinuation of various lines. That's what supposedly Q's is for. They're going to consolidate all the lower end and mid-range mountain bike and even road components into Q's. So we're going to see a lot of consolidation of just mechanical options. I think looking at other industries that have also gone from this, analog mechanical to electronic digital, transition, which is pretty much like every industry or every hobby, everything I've ever liked. What seems to be constant is that the older mechanical stuff won't completely disappear, but its availability will become scarce. The price will be driven up by collectors and the diehards. And while new mechanical analog stuff will still be created, it won't be nearly to the same level of quality as when it was in its heyday. And that makes sense. I just feel like it's something to be aware of, to maybe to mourn a little bit, knowing that this might be about as good as it gets, but also to just like appreciate it. This isn't a call to start hoarding, but just to kind of realize that just realize what epoch we're in terms of bikes and so many things. So it probably won't surprise you that um, I watch some audiophile channels, even though I'm not an audiophile. I don't have the budget for that. I barely have the budget for bikes, to be honest. And I definitely don't own any what would be classified as audiophile gear. But there's an interesting resurgence in physical media, in particular CDs, which I thought was kind of fascinating. So I watched several videos on how, in some ways, CDs were at a peak music medium where you had the highest quality and you still maintain ownership. Because now, with streaming services, the quality is taking a hit and you don't actually own the music. You can't share it. You can't put it on multiple devices without a lot of faff and paying licensing. So a lot of people have started picking up CDs again just because it's relatively inexpensive. The sound quality is, about as good as it gets, and you actually own it, which is fine. But one of the problems that, these audiophiles are encountering is there's while there's no lack of CDs, there's actually a lack of decent CD players. That basically every kind of modern CD player that you buy today is using the same disc spinning mechanism. Whereas in the past, Sony had developed all this R&D and made really slim and technologically advanced disc spinner mechanisms. Today, it sounds as if there's literally only one factory making one kind of disc reading system. So to some extent, I feel like that that might be the direction that bikes will go down. That there's not going to be like a complete lack of mechanical things ever, but the quality isn't going to be that good. The tooling is going to be lost or destroyed. And to be honest, let's say there was like a mechanical bike resurgence for whatever reason. Maybe there's a big EMP that shut down everything. There likely wouldn't be the same demand to warrant that same level of investment to restart the machines. We might see small individual builders, fabricators, take up the task, but it's going to be expensive, and it's going to be short supply. I think for me, one of the last biggest mechanical components um, upgrades I've seen, wide tires notwithstanding, has actually been the Grotech Equal brakes. Those brakes are amazing. It's amazing to me that a small company was able to develop it. I think maybe if Shimano was still interested in supporting mechanical disc brakes, they'd probably develop something similar or acquire that tech or patent from Grotech. But as it stands, there's no interest, and right now the only there's no interest, and right now the only game in town for high quality mechanical disc brakes are the Grotechs or the Pauls, both pretty spendy. The Grotechs marginally less spendy, but I can see where it gives people pause. All right, so levers here are GRX of some flavor. I'm not sure if these are the 400s or the 800s. How many speeds are back here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So 11 speeds. The derailleur, like we mentioned, is the 810, which is a 2x11. I love that the cassette is already an 11x40. Cranks here are GRX 600, 170, so a little bit long for me. I might swap these out to some shorter cranks while I'm reviewing it, just because. All right, it's shifting really good out of the box. Derailleur hair looks really straight. Yeah, I mean the paint on this is beautiful. Nice. It's kind of a, I don't know, like a warmish blue color. So if you don't live in Spain, you probably don't know who or what Sombra is. Pablo is a well-respected frame builder here in Spain, based out of Madrid. His own company is called B Block A, but he's partnered with his friend Manolo. I think he owns a bike shop called Cicle Helique, and they get together every couple of weeks and do a batch production run under the brand Sombra. So this is a way for a couple of smaller builders to unite and create something that a lot more people can afford, that can just tap into because they're already pre-made. In some ways, it's kind of, like the Breadwinner in Portland when Ira and Tony got together and started Breadwinner. This kind of a similar model. So here's that fork I was talking about. and it's got 2 adjustable rakes, 47 and 52. So that, of course, would affect the trail and, in theory, affect how the bike handles, more stable, less stable. Carbon fork, 3-pack mounts over there. We got a mounting point for, I'm assuming, a fender. I don't know if that'll carry a load. I'll ask Pablo. Zip handlebars, GRX levers, and yeah, the lighting is not going to do this paint justice, but it's looking pretty sweet. Nice external routing, just as all bikes should be, in my opinion. GRX 2x cranks, GRX front derailleur. Not a fan of this design. This is like overly complicated. Why did they like stick a plastic cap and you have to do all this? Oh well. Let's see. Shifter cables routed under the chainstay. Here's the GRX 810 trailer, 11 to 40 cassette, and you can see the rear brake mounting there. And it looks pretty sweet. So the Grus is named after a bird, but many people have commented and said that Grus actually means gravel in Norwegian. I could have it wrong. But again, here's a look at the welds. Nice and clean. So it's cool to see a kind of semi-production run steel bike in Spain, where it gives you kind of an alternative to like a Surly or a Salsa or something more mass-produced. If you want something made in Europe, made in Spain, then this is a cool option. And interesting. So it looks like this is kind of a mullet tire setup, because this front tire is definitely not the same as the rear tire. This one seems a lot wider and it has more of an aggressive tread. So this one measures out to a 51. So we got a little bit of a mullet tire setup. It's kind of interesting. So these are the Cinturado Gravel M's. And on the rear here, these are also the Cinturado Gravel M's, but not as wide. What's the stated width here? The important stats like the width and stuff is so small. Okay, so this is 29 by 2 inches, and this is 700 by 50, just to make it absolutely confusing. Okay, I'm gonna put the front wheel in and see how it goes. I'm gonna assume that they set the tire mullet on purpose. I'm gonna ask Pablo. Right, the spike needs some pedals. I'm gonna put on a pair of these Ritchie Comp Bigfoot pedals. Been testing this on another bike and been really digging them. Nice and supportive. Definitely a big platform. See here, it's actually wide enough to fully support my Lem shoes, which tend to be on the wide side. So always a good tip if you're installing pedals, putting them on, you want to turn the bolt toward the front of the bike. So towards the front to install and towards the rear to uninstall the pedals. It's really easy to, especially if you're on like tour and under duress or something, to cross thread and like screw up the cranks and the pedals, which is a bad time. Looks like the shifter, the front rotor's got some trim, which is nice. Yep. GRX levers feel really good. I do like them. So this bike is the size small, which I believe is about the equivalent of a 52 size frame. This is a Sombra Grus. Sadly, we're going to be hopping a plane to go to Portugal tomorrow to give a presentation at Oficina 35, talk about party pace. If you happen to be in Lisbon, then come by. But where do we go from here? What was the whole point of this? Again, it's less about complaining about the state of things, about railing against the impending electronic shifting AI apocalypse, but more about pausing and realizing the moment, appreciating the moment, realizing that if you're a fan of mechanical analog stuff, that I think for bikes, we're there. We're at peak mechanical. The big bike brands have made that transition, and likely, it's not going to get any better than this, and we should appreciate it. Stock up, but not too much if you're a fan. And again, I wanted to talk about this because, when I was a working photographer, I miss appreciating that moment of, peak film and realizing like, wow, this is the heyday. And from here, yes, film and camera stuff is still going to be around, but it's not going to be as good as this. And that bums me out to have missed that moment, to be not present in that moment. So for me, just taking the time, appreciating it, and hopefully some of you guys appreciate it as well. But let me know what you think. Are we at peak mechanical? Is Shimano and SRAM and the big boys still going to invest R&D into improving mechanical shifting, mechanical components, or is this about as good as it's going to get? If you guys appreciate this format, like the videos on the channel. If you can, do me a solid, join us on Patreon. It's how we're able to keep the lights on. Quite literally, how we're able to keep the lights on. It's getting tougher every day. So much noise on YouTube and in life to make this possible. But hopefully, you guys appreciate it. Support what you watch, and as always, keep the supple side down.